Hello everyone. I'm here with another guest today for my Misrepresentation of Drum and Bass podcast. Please introduce yourself.
Cheers, nice to meet you, Evie. I'm Russ, sometimes go by the name Cellar. I'm a DJ, a radio host, podcast host, and recently founded the Interstellar audio record label.
Nice. Could you tell me more about the record label is what's springing to mind right now? So talk to me about that and then I'll ask you some more about other stuff in a bit.
Yeah, of course. So it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple, right? It's just me, big support from my mate Tom, 12 Step Audio. We just kind of wanted to be in that space of putting music out. So like I've been a DJ for a long time, like I'm quite old, I'm sort of mid-30s, and got to the point where I'm not really like interested in being out until 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to get gigs at like little local events and whatever. And I put some effort into that over the summer to get gigging again, but quickly kind of realised like actually what I enjoy is the like networking side of it and the hearing new music. And I love performing, I love DJing, and I'll still DJ, but in terms of like putting my heart and soul into a project, it's not being a gigging DJ that sparks that kind of like fire in me anymore. So it's something I'd always wanted to do. Like when I was younger, maybe 17, 18, me and my friend Adam, like big shouts to Adam, it was always something that like he'd been really passionate about. Let's start a label, let's do it. But back in those days, it's like self-publishing didn't exist, right? It was vinyl record shops and it was a completely different proposition, so it never happened. But when that idea came back and I was looking into it and I was like, actually, like it's really easy to do now. It's just all online, it's all digital, just put up a small amount of money, utilise the network I've got. People are absolute legends for being willing to be involved, and I just see where it goes. I just sort of said I'll put 12 months into it, see where it goes. If it's fun, it's worth doing. So here we are. We've got like first releases coming tomorrow and in 2 weeks, so it's exciting times, mate.
Nice. I'll link all of your stuff as well in the in the description, so anyone watching this can find that all linked below. Nice. Quickly, I just wanted to say, it just came into my head when you were talking about how you're kind of done with the like gigging and like being out till 3 a.m, because I know like I've got quite a few friends that DJ and like want to start getting into like production but don't have like any production knowledge, and they don't have sort of like, because I think as much as it's very similar, it's a very different kettle of fish, I would say. I mean, I don't really know much, but do you have any tips for people that want to like sort of move away from the like DJ facing playing in a club till 3 a.m. type of thing and want to move more into like making something that's more like, I guess, got more like a longevity to it? Yeah,
sure, I understand, and like kind of been through that process myself a little bit, because when you're a DJ, people say what's the next step you need to take to be able to get like consistently booked, and the answer is always you need your own tunes. You need to be a producer in your own right. You know, the days of DJs being superstars are kind of done. Like unless you're already established in that space, like Andy C or Mampy Swift or someone like that, it's that sort of thing doesn't exist anymore. So everybody now is like, if I'm going to be moving to the next level and getting out of the local scene, I've got to produce. And so yeah, absolutely understand why people are on that grind. And the cliche thing to say is like you've got to make 1,000 shit tunes before you make a good tune, and it's kind of true. Like I've never passed that sort of precipice. Like I've spent time making music, and it's fun. And if you enjoy the craft and you've got access to the tools, there's no way to like be upfront about it. Like you need certain tools, they're expensive. You need certain processing power on a computer, and that's expensive. And most importantly, you need a load of time, because you'll sit there, you know, oh, this hi-hat, no, that hi-hat, no, this hi-hat, no, that hi-hat. And like to learn how all the instruments you're working with operate, learn a workflow in the workstation you're using, it's just long. So like make sure you've got the time to invest and be still enjoying like putting a lot of time into repetitive stuff, like listening to for hours. But if you're in that space, then absolutely like learn your workstation is my biggest tip. Like pick a workstation, stick with it, learn like 1 or 2 key instruments, and just like really craft on that sound. You know, there's so much help out there, like YouTube help or other producers. People are super sound to talk to, like little video guides on the internet of D&B producers breaking down their tracks and stuff. And like, you know, I'm speaking a little bit out of where I'm qualified to talk about, because in my own right I'm not a producer, but what I've seen from the producers that I know or that I work with, they know their tools inside out, and that gives them the ability to work quickly, come up with a sketch, and maybe they've got like a catalogue of sketches that are just sort of like 8 bars, and if they're interested in the idea, then they might turn one of them into a longer track. But from what I see on the outside looking in, I think knowing your tool and sticking to it and really learning the tool is the way to kind of get through that 1,000 tunes to make 1,000 shit tunes to make one good tune.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, I mean, I don't know, I feel like your perception of the scene is probably a lot different to mine, because you've been involved in it. Well, when did you get involved in it? Like tell me a bit about that before I ask this question.
Yeah, so I was having this conversation with people that are like my age the other week, and sort of saying, like, because you're a bit younger than me, right? Like, so yeah. I was saying the younger people these days probably look at our time as old school, whereas when we were sort of getting started, it was like the new school. When Jump Up was just getting started, like, you know, people like Clips, people like TC, when these guys were first coming through, that's so like 2004, 2005, 2006, that sort of time. You know, that was new school then, but looking back now, we're probably sort of considered part of the old school generation. So when I started getting into drum and bass and started going to raves, it was DJs like Andy C, Nicky Blackmarket, Dillinger, those kind of old school guys, the proper dons that still smash it today. And then there was the kind of like younger generation coming through, and that younger generation, people like Sub-Zero, Taxman, TC, you know, now they're the kind of older dons in the game, and there's a whole new breed of people coming through. So I think, at least in my journey, I'm kind of on like I suppose the 3rd generation of the scene since I've kind of been involved with it. There was one before me, I came in the 2nd, yeah. And now we're in a new wave, and it's cool to see it transition. It's obviously people's tastes change, my own taste change, but the scene's always going to move forward, and so you kind of got to see it, you got to understand it and get involved with it, right?
I mean, yeah, it probably sounds like, to you, for me to say this is probably like, it probably just sounds a bit stupid, but like I've found, because I've been going to race since I was like 16, so that's what, like 4 years now, and even I don't know if it's just my perception of it is like different, or it's just, I think COVID is like a big factor in my head that's changed raves a lot. But like, so I sort of had that 2 years before and the 2 years after, which is like how I sort of define the rave scene in my head so far. Yeah. And I feel like, and I don't know if this is just because I see it from more of an inside point out, like known people inside the scene. Like, I don't know if this was just something that I just never experienced before, but it had definitely gone on. Because I feel like now it's a lot more of like a popularity contest, and it's more, I think that like, because obviously drum and bass is becoming so much more mainstream now, and it's getting like a lot more popular, is like a big, it feels like a race for like a lot of people, like a bit of a competition. And I feel like when I used to go to raves, I don't know if it was just because I was young and I was like, I just didn't really like acknowledge that. But do you think, like, from your perspective, that's something that's always been around, or that's something that is more of a new thing as the scene has grown?
I think it's a bit in the middle, right? Because I think there has always been that element of competition. So like when you, and maybe I'm speaking for you, so like correct me if it needs to be, but when you start to get closer to the scene, you know, when you first go raving, you just sort of part of the audience, but when you step towards being part of the production or involved with the characters, then you start to see that competition much more. And that was present like when I was just starting out and trying to get residencies as a DJ as like an 18, 19-year-old guy and completely failing on it. But the point is like that group of people that were there, it was a race, it was a competition. You got to get established in your town, and then you've got to get out of your town, and that's the sort of way to get through it. And that competition's always been there, but I think where it's now really more prevalent is obviously because we're all online, and especially with that time that was taken off during COVID, people like forced to have an online presence, and so now like the social media thing's really mixed with it, and that's good because it's helped push the scene more mainstream. Like there's been more recognition of the scene now, but then the downside, it's not really a downside, but like the cost of that is that competition's massive now. Like everybody's on it because it's so accessible as well, right? Anyone can get a 80 quid controller, buy a bunch of tunes on Bandcamp or whatever, and be a DJ and be a good DJ and start streaming it live. And you know, everyone's now got the ability to push themselves forward. There's less of a gateway. Like you used to have to go knocking on doors and be like, can I get a set? Can I get a set? And unless you got in that gateway, you couldn't be part of the competition. Whereas I think now what's different is anyone can be part of the competition, and that's why it feels bigger.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost a bit of like a paradox to me in the sense of how before I feel like there was maybe less competition because there was less, like you said, like accessibility to that.
I'd fully agree with that, mate, yeah.
It's almost like, I said this in another podcast that I made about procrastination, and I was saying about how, like, a lot of, this is kind of not to do with drum and bass, but kind of I'll apply it in that sense of like, a lot of people, older people are like, oh, you're like lazy, or you're not putting the effort in, or you're not this. And I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think that the standard is much higher than it was before. Like, for these DJs, like one of these DJs that is now really struggling to get a set, or like their tunes aren't doing well, maybe in the 90s they would have come along and been like absolutely revolutionary. But just because now it's almost like, it's so, I feel like as much as you can create new things, it's so hard to like be like an innovator within drum and bass because there's so much that's been done already.
It's absolutely right. It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're spot on. It's the same with like performing as well, right? Because you've got to match up to everybody. When you were, like when I was younger, sounds bad, and you're like trying to get a gig in the local scene, you've only got to match up against the other local DJs. And, you know, like a small town like where I come from, it's probably only got like 10 or 15 kind of DJs that are trying to break through. So the pool that you're fighting against is a lot smaller. Now, if I drop a clip on TikTok or whatever, I've got to compete against the 100,000 D&B DJs that are putting clips on TikTok every day. And, you know, put my label hat on for a minute. If I'm listening to tunes, well, you know, I can go and find, I've got plenty of choice of where I can go and say, oh, that tune's really good. That tune would have made it, but it's not as good as this one that I've just heard about. So people would say like, oh, the game's saturated, oversaturated. Like, fair enough, that's probably what that means, right? But it's just a reflection of how popular it is.
Yeah, I mean, I see, like, I think a big thing for me was like, I'm trying to think who sort of like the first, I want to say, like, I'm veering towards like Pink Panthers. I know she doesn't really like involve herself with the scene. She's kind of cracked America and she's like off doing her own thing. But I feel like she was the first like sort of like, I don't know, like pop drum and bass kind of. It's not like Liquid, but I know there's been big, like, I don't know, singles, I guess, that have come up. But I feel like she was the first artist where a lot of people, especially American people, were like, what is this music?
Yeah,
like
100%.
I don't know what this music is. And like, I think, do you know, me and all my friends, we were like so frustrated because we were like, we want her at our raves at Black Swan where there's like 100 people there, but because now she's super famous, she's not going to do that, do you know? And like all of these TikTok artists that are making like, I guess, pop drum and bass, and it's actually being received so well, is like, we are trying to like keep you for ourselves, and these people, they like blow up, and then I'm like, but I just want to see you at a rave, and you're not going to be at a rave because you're headlining a festival. And it's like, that's such a good thing, and it does such good things for like the drum and bass like environment, I guess. But maybe it is just that sense of gatekeeping for my little 16-year-old self.
It's an interesting perspective though, because you sort of you're clinging on to the authenticity of the scene, which is great, especially from like the new generation, fair dues. Like, but at the same time, you've got that awareness that it does push the scene forward. That's a fair point, fair play. There's always been that, right? Because like Shy FX was in the charts in the 90s, and before that others as well. And you know, that's before my time, but at the same time it was it seen then as like, oh, you're selling out or you're going on to bigger things. But you know, if it hadn't happened, then my whole generation probably wouldn't have known drum and bass and got involved and so on and so forth. And it, like Waypoint's doing things right now that are going to do it again for a whole other group of people being in the charts, and that's wicked. Like more for it. You know, the more I hear drum and bass on Radio 1, I still get excited about it. Yeah,
it's weird because, you know, it's funny because my mum hates drum and bass. Like, she absolutely like does not. Sometimes I'll play a Liquid song and she's like, okay, I can tolerate this. But it's funny because she used to, I think, like, unknowingly love drum and bass. When I was younger, she would always drive around. I don't know what the show's called. On like, it was on like a Friday night or something. And like, I can't remember what it was, but I distinctly remember it being drum and bass. Looking back now, it was always drum and bass. And she'd always be like, I like this show because they played different stuff. And like, I remember saying to her, like, you're listening to drum and bass. Huh? Yeah. You're listening to drum and bass. You don't think you're listening to drum and bass, but you are listening to drum and bass, and you like it. And she'd be like, no, it wasn't. And it's like, it's funny because I feel like a lot of people, see like the name and they're like, to be fair, I do that with techno. I hate techno so much, but then sometimes like I'll hear a song and I'm like, that's okay, and someone's like, that's techno, and I'm like, don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's bad, but it's like this thing about, as it's becoming more socially accepted, I feel like people are more like, that's drum and bass, really? Like, I didn't think it had that much like range to it, I guess.
That's the key, right? So it's, and every genre of music's like this, right? The breadth of genre, like house, techno, drum and bass, whatever. You'd be so surprised when you sit down and go from like one end to the other and you think, there's just no way these are the same type of music. You know, like if you're listening to a Latte track and then you go and listen to a Calibre track, you're not going to, you know, for somebody that doesn't know D&B, even though it's got the same straight beat pattern, they're not going to think it's the same type of music because they listen to pop music that's got the same sort of straight beat structure, but one's an indie track and one's a sort of pop girl track. You know, they don't see that as the same genre as music, whereas we see the scene as this massive boiling pot of all these different styles and all these different flavours. And for me, at least, that's like one of the things that I've always loved about it. Wherever my mood can go, there's like a corner of D&B that suits. You know, I'll spend a lot of time listening to the more jazzy side. I'll spend a bit of time listening to the more deeper side. It just, however I feel, there's always a corner of music that I can go to that's still 170 BPM, you know, can DJ it, and it suits my mood. It's great.
Yeah. I'm not sure why this question has come in, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It feels a bit generic, but top 3 songs either ever or right now?
Right now or ever. Like the cliche
There's
answer.
2 very different questions I've just asked you, so you could do 6 if you want.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to pull out 6 random names out of my hat, and then I'd spend the rest of the day being like, oh shit, I should have said that one. Like the tunes that I've really enjoyed last year, this 2022, so like right now, have been more in the kind of jazzy space, the liquidy space. And like LSB put out an album and an EP last year that was amazing. So like I'll shout out LSB Renaissance Songs because that was brilliant. Alkali did a sort of a double single. Most people won't even know who Alkali is, but track called In My Mind, which I just can't stop listening to even now. And I'll come back to a third one from now, maybe something a bit heavier. But yeah, we'll come back to it. But then like if I was to look to all time, right, there's been some tunes that have like absolutely defined my journey through drum and bass. And so like when I first got into drum and bass, well, I didn't like drum and bass before I got into drum and bass. I was into like nu metal, rap rock, hip hop. You know, I sort of grew up on like, let's say I went from maybe Blink 182, Linkin Park, Eminem. Like that was the kind of generation of music I was in. People who play drum and bass wasn't into it. Then I started listening to like more like what you'd call IDM, things like Aphex Twin, Square Pusher, and then someone played a track called Scar by Zinc, and I was like, shit, this is the one. So Scar by Zinc, just if it wasn't for that track, I wouldn't even know about wouldn't even be into drum bass, so I'd shout that out. Stepping forward a little bit for more defining tunes, when The Deep came out by TC, which is showing my age, that was the first time I like went to a record shop and was like, I want to be there when the shop opens the day it comes out to get this tune on vinyl. That's the first time I did that for drum and bass, so it's got pretty defining, right? And then tunes like Logistics, Together, VIP, because that was what sort of showed me into the more melodic side. I kind of got to shout out some of us as well, right? Pendulum, Another Planet, that's a fucking banger, even if you listen to it now. Sorry, hope it's okay to swear. So yeah, there'd probably be what I'd say about 6 tunes. I think I gave you 6 tunes in the end.
Good, thank you very much. I mean, I knew a couple of them, but then I think the other, like, I'm sure my repertoire is probably very disappointing to a lot of people. Like, one of my friends, she like pours hours and hours into like searching for new music, and like she has this story she does where she just like every day she posts a new song she's found.
Love that.
And like she probably know every single song you're talking about, and like I just people like that. I always feel a bit like put out when people are like, and I know this, and I know this, and I know this, and I know this, and I'm like,
yeah. And like I never like try and be point scory about this, but there is an element of that. There is an element of that, which is why I kind of enjoy being in the space I'm in. It's like when I picked up getting back properly on DJing about a year ago and was like, I'm going to start putting podcasts out or music out, I was thinking in my head like, I want it to be always about new music. because I want to be on the pulse of the scene again. Like I've had kids and I've been focusing on work and life and stuff, and just drifted completely away and just listened to the music that I know and that I listen to. And I wanted to get that back of being like interested in the scene and the, maybe you call it dub culture, but D&B's always had that thing about new music. It's been part of the scene, and I wanted to get that back. So now I am like focused in sort of my little corner of the scene. What's coming out in that soulful space? What's coming out in that minimal space? Is it people I know? Is it people that are new? What are the labels doing? And I don't do it to be all like stand outside, have a fag and score points about stuff I know. It's more around like I enjoy that kind of feeling connected to the scene, feeling connected to the music, and I'd lost that. And that was part, going back to that point I was talking about earlier about like why a label, that was kind of part of it, was like it's the logical next embodiment of that interest, that thing that like twigs my enjoyment, you know. So I do enjoy sitting on Beatport and being like, what came out this week, and then I'll make a playlist and bang it up and whatever. But partly that's to like hopefully get some producers interested in working with my label, but at the same time partly it's because I love hearing the new music, right?
Did the podcast start as like a promotional tool, like what was the podcast like? Explain the podcast.
it's a sham, right? I'll be honest. So, like the reality of like what actually happened. My kids went to stay at my mum's one Saturday night. I woke up on a Sunday morning early, because that's what you do when you're a dad. You wake up whether your kids are there or not. My wife, shout out Trish, big up Trish, she was asleep, and I thought, I'll let her have a lay in. What am I going to do? I was like, I've always wanted to make a podcast. I got this mix sitting here that I recorded a few months ago. Why don't I just like record a voiceover for it and put it on SoundCloud? And then at the end of it, I was like, shit, I really, really enjoyed that. So within about 3 days, I was like, right, I'm going to record a mix, and then I'm going to like do a voiceover for it. And then about 3 days after that, I was like, I'm going to do this as like one take. I'm going to record the mix and do the voiceover at the same time. And then before I knew it, I had like 3 episodes of a podcast on SoundCloud. And I was like, do these go on Spotify? Do these go on Apple Podcasts? And then it was like, should I get someone to come and talk and do a guest mix? And it just kind of like grew from there. And then, you know, I'd reach out to people, or people would reach out to me and be like, yeah, do you want me to come on your podcast? And I was like, fuck yeah, this is cool. Like I'm talking to people that I've loved their music and never had a reason to talk to them before. And I get the opportunity to like play their tunes. And then you get like, oh, here's some dubs. Do you want to play these tunes? Because they're coming out in 6 weeks. And I'm like, yes. So it just kind of like organically spiraled from there. But, you know, the podcast was, if you looked at my notes up on my phone, right, there's probably like 5 notes of like podcast idea A, just from like the last 10 years of being like, oh, well, me and my brother-in-law who lives in the States, we could talk about the differences in being a dad living across the pond from each other. That never happened. There's probably 4 or 5 others as well, but woke up that Sunday morning and went, why not? And then here we are. So yeah, I mean, do you find it like, for me it's like such like a form of therapy? I know I talk about like a wide range of stuff outside of drum and bass, but for me, even when I'm talking about drum and bass, it's like I finish talking about something and then I'm like, I needed that. I needed to talk about that. And I know a lot of my friends that mix specifically say that when they do that, that is like a form of therapy for them. So mixing the two, I guess, would just be like the ultimate like, it's like mind release, I guess. You know, like music, half of the joy of music is being inspired by the music, and half of the joy of music is sharing it with someone else, so they're inspired by the music. And then when you listen to like a niche type of music like this, that if you went and picked like 20 people out the street, you might be lucky to find one person that likes it. So doing a mix and recording it and putting it on SoundCloud, it gives you the ability to like share that mix and know that hopefully someone else listens to it and enjoys it. For me, and I'll go on a limb and say probably for a lot of other people, if you just record a mix and do nothing with it, it doesn't give you the same joy. Like half of the joy is about it being heard and half of it's about creating the art. You know, like, would a painter still paint if nobody was ever going to see the painting? Some would, but I'm sure some wouldn't as well. And so I think that you talk about it being like therapy, like as an extrovert, you're doing like a creative art, but because you're an extrovert, unless somebody sees it, did you do anything? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Kind of need that recognition, right? Like, please like my shit, but it's not necessarily like that, but it is kind of like that.
It kind of is like that, because there's been a couple times that like I've posted like I think there was one night at like 5:30 in the morning, I was like, quite often I'll sit and I'll just like therapy trauma dump into my microphone, or like I'll chat shit about like everyone that's pissing me off at that moment, and like I'll just like go in, and obviously you can never post those, but to me that's like, it's like my way of being able to vent without worrying that it's gonna like get back to someone. But like I started doing this podcast at like 5:30, and I was literally not gonna post it at all because it was very like vulnerable. And then I posted it, and I think that's one of my best performing podcasts. And it was just me basically being like, why am I such a shit person? And it was just me like trauma dumping, and everyone was like, do you know what? Yeah, like this one was really good. And I was like, yeah, so it is right about that thing about how like, yeah, if you haven't put it out, did you really do it? So like I completely feel you on that one, like 100%.
I reckon there's a bit more to yours as well, like, because definitely as part of the audience for yours, it is that authentic thing, like being someone that wants to make a podcast. There's like so much thought that goes into like it needs to be broadcast quality or it's not good enough, and then see you and a few other people that you're just authentic. You just hit play, hit record, and whatever comes, and you do expose yourself like that a little bit. But then of course like everybody that listens can relate to that, because our heads are all a mess, like whatever's going on, the stress of the world. So it makes it relatable. You like, it normalizes it back down to like my level, and the audience presenter thing isn't like this anymore. It's more like this. Like at least for me, listening to your stuff and similar stuff like that. So I think it's good that you just do that. I remember we first started chatting, and I was like, so how do you record, and what do you do for the technology? And you were like, man, I just press record and it's done. And I was like, oh, sound, yeah, of course. Like, why would it be any different? And like, I'm clinging on to that now a lot. I mean, I was on the radio the other day and it went terribly because my equipment was letting me down. That said, generally, I've kind of lowered my self-pressure around, it's got to sound broadcast quality, it's got to be perfect. Like, it doesn't need to be. It needs to be like enjoyed by the listener and enjoyed by the creator. And that's all it needs to be. If it ain't fun, it ain't worth it, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was this guy that was like, I knew from like home, and he was like, oh, I really like where your podcast's going, but you really need to sort out your audio quality, like it's shocking. And he was like, I can sort your audio out for you. And it was around the time that my podcast with Chris Sicker was coming out, and that was like my biggest one to date. Like, he was like, from when I was like 16, I like looked up to him. To have that experience was like mind-blowing to me. And anyway, I was like, oh, for my first like big podcast interview, I'll get this guy to like sort out my audio quality for me, and it's going to be so professional, whatever. And I remember trying for every day he'd be like, yeah, I'll do it today, and it just never got done. And it was a bit like, you've offered to help with this, because apparently my audio quality is terrible, which I don't doubt that it is. I don't even listen to my podcast back when I record them. I just like post them straight away. But like, then I remember being like, I need to get this out, because I'm going back and forth with Chris about putting this podcast out, and it's just not getting done, and it's making me look, as much as my podcast may not sound very professional, one thing that I sort of like pride myself on is having a professional like workforce, I guess, structure. Like, I can talk to people casually, but being able to sort of have that, like, it is informal, but at the same time I'm going to do things when you want me to do them, and I'm going to like not mess you around. And then I was like, I'm just gonna post it. And the audio quality, we took that in his like van that he took to NAS, and there was music in the background, and there was like all these people screaming in the background, and I wouldn't have changed it. And like, it's, even though the audio quality, like, because I think especially with you're so like, obviously we don't have this on record, but we spent about like 10-15 minutes sorting out my microphone, which I wouldn't have been able to do without your help. So you've taught me things today, which I'm very, very happy about. But it's like,
it's not because something was wrong. It's just because we were using, you've not done one on Zoom before, and I did one on Zoom. It's new to me. So it's new, right? It's not because something was wrong. It's just new. Yeah.
But it's like, it's nice that you sort of don't feel the need, like you're saying with your radio show, to like put as much pressure on yourself, even if you don't think it sounds like the highest quality of anything. I guarantee half the time people don't care, or they don't realise. Like, So yeah, I think that's a good thing. But
it's clear to see like improvement though, right? If everyone, I used to sort of subscribe, if everything I do is better than the last time I did it, then eventually it will be good enough. And then you kind of get to like, if you listen to my first podcast and then so on, the recording quality is shocking or whatever. But then you get to the point where it's like, all right, it's good enough now. Like, do I need to bust my balls to make it like marginally better anymore? Like, that's kind of where I've got to anyway. But I just want to touch on something you said, right? You said you kind of hate waiting for people to do stuff. And like, this is the thing that frustrates me as well. Like, on one hand, I'm like super grateful for expertise from people that know what they're doing in some space that I don't know what I'm doing. But I hate waiting for somebody. If I could do like 80% good enough myself, I'm just going to do it myself and just like deal with it. So it's sometimes challenging, like working in a group where you're like you want to be reliant on like someone else's skill set. Like, you've got expertise I don't have, you're offering it to me, I'll gladly accept it. Then it gets down to crunch time where it's like, I want to move on now. Like, I want to move this thing forward, but we're still sort of sat here waiting to do things. It's frustrating. Are
you sort of like one of those people that's quite like, how would I word this? Like, constantly, like, this is what's going through my brain. Traveling at the speed of light. Like, you're just like, go, 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 go. Like, just bit. Like, you don't like to be stagnant.
A little bit. Like,
yeah.
In my work mind, I'm like that. So for like for a day job, I do project management, right? So like, my job is literally, okay, what are the actions that need to be done? Who needs to know what? Yeah. And when's it got to be done? So like, I spend my work mind being like, what's the next thing that needs to do? Let's do it now. Let's get it out of the way. Let's get it done. So like, my side project's kind of the same mentality as well. My natural like work mentality just carries over to that. And like my Trish as well, my wife, she's pretty action orientated. She's way more than me. She's like, let's get it done, let's do it now. And I'm like, oh man, I'm tired. Like, I spent all day doing that. Can I just have a break? But if I get into my like introspective mode, I'm happy to just waste an entire day like vegged out doing nothing, and then think, oh, I had loads of stuff I needed to do, and then like the impending doom. So I can do both, but if I'm in work mode, it is like, let's go, let's get this done. Which, when you're then delegating out to other people for certain things, it can get a little bit like, okay, the thing I need is like down here on the list. I've done this, and then it's like, okay, now you're like stopping me from getting to the next one, and I'm like, try not to get frustrated. It's like,
yeah,
you know, and then eventually I'll just do it anyway. Like Tom, shout out to Tom. I absolutely love Tom. No disrespect to Tom. I was chatting to him and he was like, oh, I'll do a little bit of graphic design. I'll make you a logo if you want. It's like, love that, man. Absolutely love that. I've got no skills at all in that space. And he's busy with his own projects, no doubt. And I wasn't offering to pay him, so there's no hard feelings. Eventually I was like, I really want that logo. I'm just going to give it a go because I've got nothing to do today. And I sent him a couple of ideas and he was like, is this your way of telling me to hurry up? I'm like, not really. I'm just saying I want it and I've got time to do it now. So I thought I'd try and teach myself, because I massively subscribe to that. Like, you can learn anything to an acceptable standard if you just try and learn. Yes, you can't be an expert in something just by learning. You got to have natural talent, but you can learn everything, I think, to a passable standard if you give it a go. Learn by failure, study, reflect, give it a go. Tangent anyway, but I subscribe to that model.
Yeah, I mean, was it you? I think I was saying to it was either you or someone else. I can't remember. That it took me about 3 months to figure out what an RSS feed was.
Yeah, it was me.
To actually put out a podcast. Like, because for anyone that doesn't know, like, and you're probably gonna have to correct me, but an RSS feed, I think, is what like allows the new episodes to like come out every time you post it. So you don't just post to Spotify or to Apple. You've got like have like a hosting site. And I was literally like online, like crying, like why is this so hard for me to figure out what a fucking RSS feed is? Like, it's so hard. And then like now it's just like, it's like, obviously that's what it is, obviously, but it's like, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't have just done it. Like, because I was doing podcasts for about a year before, maybe a year and a half before I actually started posting them out. And
interesting.
Everyone was, I think that's why I was so like, it was just second nature. It wasn't like awkward when I was doing it because I was just used to it. But everyone was like, why are you not doing it? And I was like, because I just don't understand technology. And I can't do technology, and I would ask people, and like, because at the time I didn't really know anyone that made podcasts. Like, obviously, like famous people, but they're not going to reply to my DMs being like, "Can you please help me?"
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's weird. It's weird because like, I definitely taught myself that skill, and like now I'm doing like more of the visual stuff. Like this is my first visual one, and I do want to start getting more into that eventually at some point. But this is like my first time, and I've learned so much today. So I feel like I've done like my daily tasks of learning things.
Well, you know, I read somewhere the other day, I can't remember where I read it, so I can't credit whoever it was that said it, and whether it's accurate or not, who knows. But the general gist was, if you spend 15 minutes a day doing something, you'll be better than 85% of the world's population at that thing. And like, it makes sense, right? Because probably only 15% of the world's population do a particular thing. So if you do it every day, you're going to be better than everyone that doesn't do it every day. So it makes sense. But when you think about it in that kind of like terms, you're just like, okay, I'm going to try something today. If I learn something today, no matter how small, that's a good thing. I've like pushed it forward, right? So I'm a big believer in that. Just try, have a go, figure it out. I want to ask you though, what did you do with the podcasts that you recorded before you learned how to post them? Did you post them, or are they sat in an archive?
So I have them all. They're basically, I didn't have like a microphone or anything. I used to have a Snapchat story, like a private story, so I started getting really into spirituality after I had like a bad accident. And I realised that a lot of people had no clue. Like, I think people are a bit more clued in now because of like social media awareness of it, but people just had no clue. Like, they were like, what are you doing? You've gone crazy. So I made this story and just started talking about like the different belief systems that it had taught me and the different life skills that I'd learned. And I don't know, it kind of veered into like loads of different stuff about like perspective and the media and religion and people were like, Evie, I love you, but I do not have the time to sit and watch you on Snapchat for 30 minutes. Like, because it's just me, like my face. And so I've started putting like some of them on TikTok, and they've been received horribly.
Oh, really?
Most of them have done all right. I posted one the other day about Andrew Tate, and I got absolutely rinsed.
Yeah, but the incels will just pick on anybody that says shit about
Tate. So it's interesting though, because it's like, obviously the podcast, like, it's a funny story. I was out like a couple of weeks ago, and this guy who knew that I make podcasts was like, we were in a smoking area, and his friend was like quite possibly the most like patronising man I've ever met in my life. And he couldn't believe that there was no visual aspect to my podcast. And he was basically saying to me, the only reason that anyone would listen to you is because you're pretty. He was like, you have nothing to offer apart from your looks. And I was like, there is no visual element. Like, it's just the microphone. And he was like, I don't believe you. Like, he was like, there is no way that you have anything of any form of quality to add to this world apart from your face.
What? Does this guy even know you? Like, what's he judging?
No. He was like his friend. He was just like a stranger, and he was like, "Oh, so what? You've got like 10K, is it, on YouTube? Oh, what? Yeah, like." And I was like, "No." I think I have 2 subscribers on my YouTube. Like, I was like, no, and it's not my face. But it's funny how like it's weird because I feel like when my face isn't involved, people listen a lot more. Does that make sense? I feel like people make less of a judgment.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's hard. It's a really difficult thing to talk about, and like accept that, you know, cis white male, my opinion doesn't count. But there is a lot of that at the moment where it's like, is the scene trying to actually be better, or is it trying to say it's better? Because, no disrespect, but like all the big female DJs, pretty good-looking people. Like, where's the ugly DJs? Like, it's the same on the men's side too, but not as bad, right?
Do you know?
I don't want to upset anybody by that statement. It's not meant that to be.
No,
but, I
have a friend who, she was basically saying to me that she'd be really interested in doing like a women's only podcast to talk about her side of the story. And she is like literally one of the most beautiful girls I know. And she said that the amount of men promoters that have said, I'll give you a set if you sleep with me, or I'll give you a set if you do this for me, and it's like, it just shows that as much as like I feel like they play it like there's this whole, you have to present in a certain way these days, otherwise you will get cancelled, I feel like. Whereas, like, it's as much as they can present in this, like, oh, I care about women's rights, it's like, not behind the scenes, you don't really. It's, so you are right in that.
Because, like there's, I don't really have anything valuable to say other than you kind of get lulled into a sense of security that we've moved past that. Like, that's always been present, but you start to see from, like, the general wave of populace that, like, as a culture, maybe we're moving past that. But if there are people with first-hand experiences that say, yeah, bullshit, it's still just as bad as it ever was, then, especially in a scene like ours that shouts about it being about peace, love, and respect, it's I don't really have much to sort of say other than it's a shame.
Yeah. It is a shame. But I think there are a lot of positive things that have sort of stemmed from the scene. Like, I mean, for me personally, like, I guess, like, clubbing culture and drum and bass, like, nightlife culture, that has taught me a lot about how, like, I don't need to go out and get smashed and watch these boys fight and scrap each other, and, like, because realistically, like, I was talking to, I can't remember, I think it might have been Ollie when I did my podcast with Formula, and he was saying about how when you go to a rave, you actually are there for the music. You're there for, you're not just there to go out. Yeah. Like, sometimes you are, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, I feel like when, like, drum and bass has taught me so much about going out for a reason. Like, I'm going out to see this person tonight, to see this artist. It's like a weekly concert.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is one thing that I do really like about it.
I'm agreed on that. And for me, that was one of the biggest things that got me into, like, going to raves. Because, you know, when you're sort of 16, 17, 18, you first start going out in town, get into the clubs, and you got to dress up and smell nice. And what are you there to do? You're there to pool, and you drink too much, and you spend too much money. People have a fight. Maybe you go home with a girl, maybe you don't, whatever, but that's what it's all about. And then the first time I went to a drum and bass event was like, this is a club, but it's actually a concert. This is like if I was to go to a concert with some friends and listen to people on stage, but in a club, and it's loud as shit, and it's really good music, and it's on till 4 o'clock in the morning, and whatever else comes at 4 o'clock in the morning. For me, that's what it was all about. And instantly I was like, I'm never going, like, clubbing again. But it just wouldn't go. Like, what's the point? Like, what am I going to go out into town and do, like, £5 Jaeger bombs and listen to shit music when, like, do you know what I mean? It's just instantly, like, light bulb moment. This is where I belong. This is where I should have been. I'm happy to be here, and I would like to please stay around. Can I have a card for the club? Here I am, like, 15, 20 years later, you know, so happy days.
Yeah, no, I have so many friends that are, like, new to raving and sort of maybe have been doing it for, like, a bit longer, and, like, I feel like there's this definitive transition period. I do a marketing degree, and I've just done a huge project, which was like 75% of this module on, it was on subcultures, and so I picked drum and bass subculture, and there was this, I can't remember the theorist. I really can't for the life of me. I could pull it up, but I'm not going to do that. And it was basically, it was about neo-tribes and how drum and bass kind of falls into the whole idea of, like, a neo-tribe, and this idea of, like, you subscribe to this culture or this identity, and there's this period, there's like 4 or 5 stages, I can't remember what they're called, but it's this period of transition where you, I guess, hear about it, and then you slowly get involved with it, or your friends are involved with it, and you get involved through that. And then there's this period of, like, reprogramming that goes on in your, like, subconscious brain, where you start to think, what do I identify with this subculture, based on what, I guess if we're talking about clubbing, based on what I was identifying with before. And you start making all these pros and cons, and then you get, like, super, super into it, and then you become, like, a fully fledged new member of society with your new, like, neo-tribal status. Yeah. And then you come out of it with this, like, new identity. And it was so interesting learning about that. And I was like, that is me and, like, all of my friends. And it's there in science. It's, like, sociology, psychology, whatever you want to call it, and it's like that. It really is the like I've seen so many people turn from like the like Prism girls into like the raver girls, and it's like it's like usually it's such like a nice thing to watch, but maybe I'm just biased.
I think like there's a bit more authenticity with the D&B scene, right? Like if you go out to a rave as a guy or a girl, you're probably more comfortable in the or anything. You're probably more comfortable in the clothes that you're wearing in a rave than you are if you went to Prism. Clothes superficial, but has an impact, right? You want to be able to dance, you want to be able to move, you want to be comfortable, you want to be able to express yourself. And then because you're naturally like feeling more yourself, more comfortable, it is therefore like a more authentic scene. Yeah, there's still a lot of like, oh, I don't like Jump Purple. What subgenres do you like? So there is that still that kind of like clickiness. But I think it's like a step down from that like showy, I've got to put my best foot forward, I'm here to kind of like represent the picture perfect me. Like I feel like there's less of the picture perfect me at a rave than there is at a club. Maybe just my experience, but that's kind of like what I feel about it and why I enjoy it. Like I don't want to wear shoes and go to a dance. Like I want to dance in Nikes, man. It's more comfortable. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm rabbiting, but yeah.
No, yeah, it's interesting because I feel like seeing it sort of from two sides, seeing it from like the outsiders and the insiders perspective, I feel like I would like, as much as this probably sounds, I probably sound like, I don't know how this is going to be perceived, but because people probably say, oh, like, don't be so ungrateful, because the people I've got to meet through, I guess, being more on the inside or like knowing people that are artists has taught me so much, especially technologically. Like I like wouldn't know how, I probably wouldn't know how to make a podcast if I didn't have DJ friends or producer friends that were like, you need this wire. Why do you not have this one wire? Like, but one thing that I feel like is that when you're just a raver, it's kind of, it is about that authenticity. But then as soon as it starts getting into the green room, I guess we'll call it, it gets hierarchical very quick. And I know quite a few people that I would say their persona is very different to who they are, because they're trying to put some like identity or brand forward to get to where they want to be. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but I do see that quite a lot, how with like when you start sort of climbing on that ladder, it's the same as I guess like the fame ladder, really. It's like
same at work, same, right? Same at work.
Yeah,
you know, your like work self and your home self are different, and I think there are like justifiable reasons why you would have that. Like you would have your sort of work face to make sure you say the right things, you impress the right people, you get the right opportunities. Like I get that, I do it myself, we all do it. It's how life, sadly, that's what makes the world go round. But at the same time, if you can keep that work self like true to your heart, then things are a bit like easier. And you know, me being mid-30s, you kind of learnt that at like 30, 32. Like if you actually stay true to yourself instead of like trying to represent falsity, then it's actually easier to kind of get those things you wanted to get anyway, because it is authentic and people like trust you. And if you walk with dignity and humility, it comes back to you. Like, you know, I spent a lot of time with a chip on my shoulder as a like mid-20s kind of guy, like the world owes me a favour, why can't I do the things I want to do, shit on anybody I need shit on to get where I want to get to. And eventually the world shits on you back, and that kind of like humbles you. Like TC once said to me once, like, the world humbles everybody at some point, and that's true. And when that happens, you go back to being that kind of like characterless person, but you still be in a work face, you still protect your brand and do the things you got to do, then the interactions then I feel like are much more fun, they're much more genuine, they're much more meaning, they matter. And yeah, but like for me at least at the moment, interacting with people that are a bit older that I kind of hadn't bothered to interact with, it's fun, because like you be real about what your life's like. Like, no, I can't come to that gig at 3 o'clock in the morning because my kid will be up at 5 o'clock in the morning screaming at me, man. So thanks, but no thanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like as well, like what you were saying about like being humbled by the world, I feel like that's why we sort of maybe have more respect for people that are a bit older, not just within the scene, just in every facet of life, because like you can sort of appreciate that they've been through things and they've seen, whether it's the scene with, I don't know, they lived through like the 90s, early 2000s, whatever, or whether it's a war, your nan lived through a war. It's the same thing of like they've lived through struggle. And I feel like not just struggle, but experiences that aren't always the most pleasant are what give you that like greater level of like understanding, and you don't sort of go in everywhere like, yeah, I'm the best, I'm this, I'm that, because you realise that's not really what it's about. And I think that's why, like, I don't know, especially within the scene, people like Andy C and like people, I was going to name drop some people, but then I changed my mind instantly, so I'm just going to leave it at Andy C. But people like that, they're like, I think people see the where they've come from to where they are now. And I think that's like these new DJs and producers that come up, they're inspirations because they know that they've been through that, and they probably have had their knockbacks. Like, it's not like you get these like fresh 18-year-olds that come in and they're like, I can do everything, and then like they're not playing main stage at big festivals because you got to pay your dues in that sense.
And the ones that succeed as well are, I mean, in my like limited experience, I absolutely know I don't have a big presence at all, but in my limited experience, the ones that succeed are the ones that are just straightforward and humble, and don't like carry around a lot of ego. And it's hard, like myself as a young guy, like totally had the wrong impression of myself, represent myself the wrong way, and you kind of got to learn through life, right? And when you talked about when people see stuff and then it changes how they hold themselves, like some people, including my own experience, like it's not always positive. You have an experience and then you get this kind of like retribution and this like never say die attitude, and you use it for negative, and then hopefully eventually, at least like it did for me, after time goes by, you kind of like realize it's destructive and how can I be a bit better in life and so on. And I think you're right, you called out earlier in your own experience that when you have like bad experiences or traumatic experiences or whatever, and your perception changes, like for me I feel like it's this veil that disappears, like all the things that sort of like put up like the news and keeping you where you are financially and all this kind of like make ends meet type stuff that keeps your perception really close. When something bigger happens to you and you see the world like in terms of life, then you can instantly be like, all this stuff just evaporates, like poof, it's actually inconsequential, none of it matters to me. Yes, I have to like give a shit about how much money I've got and pay attention to whether there's going to be something happening, but the real things that matter are different. And then when you operate in that space, it's much easier to just be like a person first, like a human first, and there's kind of like character in the play and whatever the play is that, you know, the world is, right? Why am I talking about this? But the point I'm making is when you've had that and you're operating with people that are like that, it's just easy to just be real.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, everyone these days sort of, as much as you might not like it, we're all a brand.
Yeah.
Like, everyone is a brand, everyone, and like, I watched this video about like this whole like aesthetic thing. Everyone like fits an aesthetic or a vibe or a identity group, and like you can change it or whatever, but it's like, why can't we just exist as people? Like, we don't need to be, I don't like need to, because like I think a big thing for me, and like a lot of other people that I've spoken to about this agree, is like they want to take aspects from one subculture, one group, but also another, without feeling like they need to conform like wholly to one or the other. They can just take bits from each different subculture or part of life, and like then it makes this whole idea of having like a brand a bit, the lines blur a little bit. And then because we're so used to having like this brand mentality, we're like, well, what are you, like, who are you, what are you, what are you trying to be? And then people are like, I think that can either make people really interested in you or really confused by you. And like, it's hard. Like, I think that's why a lot of DJs that come up, they're like, do I want to be a jump up DJ, or do I want to be a liquid DJ, or do I want to this? And it's like, why don't you just do what you like? You know? And I think that's why what you're saying about authenticity goes far, because if you do just do what you like and what you think you can do, people are like, fair enough.
Dom's a great example. Dom Whiting's a great example of that, right? Like, I'm just going to go and ride a bike, play tunes. Yeah. It was nothing more than that in his head. I mean, speaking for him, but the first time he did it, it's just him riding his bike around Marlow. Now look at it, it's like 8,000 people following him around Barcelona on a Sunday and booking flights from across the world. Because it's not anything other than, this is a good idea for me, I'm going to go and do it. People are like, I love that shit too. Same about your podcast, where you're like, the episode where I just trauma dumped into the mic. Like, it's real. It's just what it is. You don't get me wrong, I'm as guilty as the next person. If I'm online, I'm mindful of what I say. I've got to protect the brand because, I would like opportunities to come my way. I don't want to, like on my personal Instagram, I'll be posting up shit about how the Tories are fucking up the country every day. You won't see that on the label's Instagram, and maybe I should be doing that. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. But for right now, at least, that kind of like work representation is protect the brand. It's just this unfortunate reality of the world we live in. Have you seen the Black Mirror episode Nosedive? If not,
is that the one where they've all got a rating?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
It's so weird that you say that to me. Like, that's actually really strange because I watched that a couple of years ago and I thought about that. It was either last night or the night before. Like, I've thought about that and I haven't thought about that in years. So for you to bring that up is very, very strange.
It's on point with what we're talking about, though, isn't it? Like, you've got to kind of be mindful about making sure you stay at this point so that the door's open for what you want to happen. That's the reality of the world we live in. And it was probably always like that. It just looked different. There was probably doors to get through at work, managers to please, people to give favours to, like, what I'm trying to say. Like, it's probably always been like that, but just in a different way. And I think Charlie Brooker nails it with his dystopias anyway, off on a tangent, but you can watch any one of those Black Mirror episodes and be like, yeah, that's what the world's like. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is strange how I feel like, as much as it might not have been as obvious in the past, I feel like it's not that it wasn't obvious, it was just people, like, they didn't necessarily have the platform to speak on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that, like, social media has really given, like, a lot of power back to, like, the people, I guess. And I think especially, like, I don't know if you've seen, I think it's D&B Direct, the, like, big drum and bass documentary. They were saying about how, I want to say it was Goldie that did this interview and said about how, like, back in the day, you had to be in the know. You had to already be in this, like, environment or this group of people, or you had to be in the right place, know the right people to be able to do well, because otherwise you just couldn't get those doors open for you. And it's the same as, like, if you look at, like, what did I watch? I watched The Notebook. This is really, like, completely irrelevant, but I watched The Notebook for the first time yesterday, and it was this whole thing of, like, high society and, like, just like why is what they're doing well when someone else is probably doing the same thing, if not doing it to a better standard, but just because they don't have the platform to put it out there for themselves, they're not getting the recognition. And I think that's what social media has really done for, like, everyone, is be able to give them that space for themselves.
The age of self-publishing, as I call it, has absolutely changed things for the better. 100%. Like 10 years ago, before SoundCloud, let's say, and you're a producer, how are you going to get your tunes heard? Unless you physically know one of the big labels, where their office is, you go put a CD through the letterbox, or you know somebody that knows somebody, there's no way you're going to get your music heard. Now you just self-publish, and you could end up with 100,000 followers that are supporting your music, paying for your music, buying your merch, but not one of the big labels know who you are, and that's fine. Like, you're self-sustaining that way. So, yeah, it comes with more competition, but it also comes with more opportunity. And, like, there's a saying, isn't it? Like, if the water rises, then all the boats rise. So, like, we're in a situation where the water has risen, and all the boats have risen. That's good overall, right? So,
yeah.
So I think
it's almost like, because there's more water, there's now more boats.
Yeah, there is that too.
Yeah.
And it's raining like crazy, so it's absolutely more water. Anyway, take the figurative into the literal.
It's just crazy how, like, I mean, realistically, in the grand scheme of things, what's 4 years? Like, it's nothing really. But I've noticed such, like, a jump in how things have gone, like, from when I was going to, like, these, like, some of the places I used to go, I think, oh my God, what was I doing there? Like, and like, but but I didn't really care. And like now I just think like it's so much, even like Lakota used to be, I feel like, obviously it's been around for a long time, but it used to be such like I feel like even when I started going, it was like this, like, it just feels a lot more mainstream now. Like a lot more people in places like that are like, they're there for like the Lakota. It's like, woo, like Lakota. And it's like, I feel like that's what I was like. And it's like, am I subconsciously, I feel like I'm about to call myself out, but I'm going to do it because it's fine. Am I subconsciously just looking down on them because they're where I was 4 years ago?
Well, I was going to say there is an element of that, like you, not that, but there's an element of you're growing as an individual in that as well, and you're also growing into the scene as well. So you're, like you've talked about, you're going from the outside looking in into being on the inside looking out. So it's kind of natural that would happen. But also, there's always been the kind of handful of like super clubs, not the right word, but like for a while it was Helter Skelter was the place you'd go to listen to drum and bass. Then it was the Sanctuary, then Ministry of Sound, and now it's Lakota. Like it's a household name now, so it's like the household name of the place to go to listen to D&B. So that comes with mobile phones and whatever else, right? So there is going to be that element of it, and that thing that will change, right? Like Sanctuary doesn't exist anymore. A lot of these other places that used to be in that space don't exist anymore. It goes around in circles, and to be honest, you've got to give shouts to the people that run that business and built that brand, because that's what everyone's trying to do, right? Every single one of us that's involved in the scene, we're trying to push our thing to be the thing. So, well done. Like, you did it, fair play. So you just kind of got to, like, look at it objectively like that and say, it's easy to say, like, oh, it was more real when it was less popular or, more authentic. But at the same time, behind the scenes, the people that were driving it, they wanted it to get where it's got, so fair play to them.
Yeah, definitely. I've got like one last actual question, and then I'll just let you say anything else if you want to. I always ask this at the end of my interviews, but like, who are your like? I would say like pioneers was the word I was going to use. Like, who are like your people that like got you into the scene, and then like honourable people that you think like you need to mention? Yeah,
appreciate that. It's a good question. I appreciate making space for that. Absolutely 100% going to shout out Christian and Adam. You guys know who you are. I'll tell you a funny story as well, because it's funny. Christian and I used to live together. It was a bit of a dive. I was in a bad place in my life. Wasn't the most responsible individual in the world. Big love to Christian for putting up with me. But anyway, we had a set of turntables on the kitchen counter, and we used to blast D&B 24 hours a day, make an absolute mess of our life. And Christian and Adam were there, and that was when we first got into drum and bass. That was when we were like, we're going to be superstar DJs. This is what we're going to do with our lives. And like, that was fun times. And a lot of who I am now as an individual comes from the shared experiences, the shared learning, the shared growth that took place in that space. So big shouts to them. Like, there's others along the way as well that got me listening to more breadth of music, like Ben and Ruel, Dan, Paul, Luke, people like that. Don't know if they watch this, but just people, local people to me, right? But then in terms of like where it's at now, the people that speak to me that are willing to kind of bring me into their discussions, like in the same way that you have, right? You approached me, said, it'd be cool to talk, so let's talk. Cookie T, I don't know if you know Cookie T. She's a DJ that just DJs on TikTok mainly. She's not been DJing that long, and she's sick, and she's just got this like penchant for putting people together that are like-minded. She's like, go out and get a bunch of people and say, yeah, you want to hang out, like you want to chat to each other, you want to help each other with stuff. And there's like maybe 10, 12, 15 sort of people that are like-minded that helping each other grow with what they're doing. Each person's after a little bit of a different thing, but big shouts to Cookie, big shouts to 12 Step, who's helping me with the label. Big shouts to all the producers that are willing to talk and help me make this happen. So like Ecomatics, HD, Ruckus, CeLo, like all these people that will go, good idea, mate. You want to work together? Let's give it a go, And then you go even further up the chain, right, to like Steve BC, Spearhead Records. He's willing to take time out and talk. Like, thanks, man. This is what it should be about. Like, is there a gate with a locked key? Or is there an open door and we can come and have a chat? You come for a tea, we can have a chat, a cup of tea. I've got to go about my day now, mate, so I'm going to go. But, thanks for popping along. Cheers for the time. for me, people that operate that way, just constant love for, really, because it used to be a gatekeeper world, and now it's like, yeah, we can come and have a cup of tea, and when I got to go. And like, I appreciate that big time, right? You're in the same boat, so big ups to you as well, Evie. Nice one.
Oh, thank you very much.
No worries.
Before I end, is there anything that you are like desperately dying to talk about that we haven't mentioned?
Oh no, because now I'm going to be all business minded and think promo, but then I'm also going to think, you flaky bastard, you should have said something meaningful. But I have to do the business thing, and I have to say, go listen to the music that the producers that are working with me are putting out through our label. So EMCD is dropping a track tomorrow called Feel. It's the 13th of January, in case depending on when this goes out, it's probably in the past, but Feel, free download. Big shouts to Ruckus, 27th of January. Got 2 tunes coming out on Interstellar Audio. Please go and support the music, support the producers. It makes this kind of like a little bit of fun that I have from my free time actually sustainable. So yeah, that would be it, I think. Evie, thank you for giving me the chance to do that. Appreciate it.
Of course. It's my first visual ever podcast, so this will stick in my mind forever.
How does it feel being on camera?
It's weird because obviously I used to do my like Snapchat ones on camera, so it's kind of, I almost feel like I'm regressing in a way. Like it's like, because I went from it being so visual to then it was just the microphone, which was weird when I started doing it. I was like, why can't I see my face? So now like it's weird, like, because I'm just like used to it, I guess, but at the same time having like, you couldn't really do interviews on the one, like when I used to do it on Snapchat wasn't the same. So this is new, but at the same time, because all my interviews I've ever done are in person.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's just technology, isn't it? Like it doesn't even feel like there's like any sort of barrier. It's just like
it becomes
the same,
natural,
really, isn't it? Like,
for me, because I'm located in the middle of the country, I'm not going to go out and try and like meet up with people face to face because everybody's in Bristol or London. So I had to start doing it online, and it does become kind of second nature, especially like a job like I do. I work on Zoom meetings anyway, so for me it's all good. But I'm glad that people are willing to talk to me this way. So cheers for taking the plunge, mate. Big up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely, like, this would be something that I would, because I had a bit of a crisis, like a whole drum and bass crisis, and was like, I am never doing a drum and bass podcast ever again in my life. And then you reached out to me, and I was like, you sent me, like, you were like, oh, I can, like, I'm free, like, these days. And I was like, do you know what? Fine, I lied. I'll do it. It's fine. I think if it had been, like, in person, in Bristol, in that environment, like, this is a very different environment to how I'm used to doing it, and the pressure is completely off, like, especially because I think we sort of had conversation before. Most of the times when I do interviews, it's the first time I've met them.
Yeah, same.
And like it's like, I think I was just getting like, I was like, oh my god, like the social anxiety, and like this just sort of, as much as there's a screen and it's still I can see you, it's like, if I really hated you that much, I could have just turned the camera off. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could have just pretended that I'd had a technical fault. But it's like, it's definitely, you've definitely opened me back up to the drum and bass podcasting space, which I do really appreciate, because I feel like my crisis is sort of, I'm finding solutions for my crisis now.
Keep
going,
nice. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's interesting, and there's not many people doing what you do in the way you do it, so keep doing it.
Oh, thank you very much. The same goes for you, and I'll link all of your...
I'll send you some links.
Everything that you want me to link in the bottom.
Do. That's what they do on YouTube.
Yes, so everyone go and look at it now, or else.
Oh, mate.
But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Evie. You take care.